So up next is Phyllis Rittner. Phyllis has a passion for theater, independent film, playwriting, and belly dancing. She is a proud inner voice presenter for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, where she speaks publicly about her experiences to schools, corporations, providers, and families. Here she is performing Secret Shame.
The winter I turned 50, I sat across from my therapist and said, "There's no way I can continue working at this miserable job for the rest of my life." Although I'd been working at a Boston law firm as a legal secretary for the past 25 years, we both knew that the statement wasn't just about my career. What I really meant was, I can no longer hide the true person living inside of me. I can no longer pretend that I'm content, suppressing my emotions and fears. I can no longer believe that my voice doesn't matter or that compromising my happiness to please others is any kind of life. Clearly, it was an existential moment. It's hard to think of myself as brave because I spent most of my life hiding. As a child, I ate shame and secrecy for breakfast, parenting a mother, father, and sister with undiagnosed, untreated mental illnesses. In the 1960s and 70s, there were no words to describe what was going on inside my house. Even if I had the words, I knew no one would ever believe me. Secrecy was an unspoken oath my family demanded I live by. I became an expert at covering up everyone's mental health conditions until decades later, when I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. My father lived all of his life terrified of the outside world, fearing contamination would kill us all. It would take weeks to explain the intricacies of how I lived in a house under a dictatorship of delusions, or as a daughter to a mother too depressed to defend her children against them. At age 10, I was the family mediator, calming down my frightened father, comforting my depressed mother, resentful of my raging sister. There was no room for my anger or fear in that house. Brainwashed into thinking that my parents were perfect, I convinced myself that my childhood anxieties and fears meant that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something I must hide. Living such a controlled home life, I didn't know what normal was. I thought I could erase my childhood by living away at college, but soon developed severe panic attacks. I lay awake every night in my dorm, heart slamming against my chest, my thoughts racing, my body rigid in terror. I didn't understand why I was so frightened, or why being separated from my parents felt so unbearable. When I moved back home a few months later, I told myself I was the lowest, stupidest, weakest person on earth because I couldn't hack it. I told myself that I would never be able to live in the outside world like other girls my age. By the time I was 30, I was on the verge of despair. A neglectful psychiatrist had addicted me to Valium and then abandoned me to fend for myself. I hid it all from my family, whose mental illnesses had only escalated. I contemplated not being on this earth, not wanting to die, but not knowing how to stop the pain and fear. But sometimes the universe presents us with angels. Unable to hide my suffering, I confided in a work friend who led me to a kind, empathetic psychologist who believed in my power and strength. He worked tirelessly with me, exploring a variety of modalities, encouraging me to take risks, challenging me to believe in myself as I faced my darkest fears. Within a few years, I went from hopeless to pursuing a passion for the stage, landing lead theater roles, living again. I started to believe that all of this wasn't my fault, that despite all of my negative childhood beliefs, I was not a weak person. that I deserve to be happy. So I've come a long way since that first night in my dorm room in 1981. Yes, I have had setbacks, including a 3-year battle with depression. Yes, I take medication. And yes, sleeping overnight away from home is still a challenge for me and probably always will be. But I have forged a new relationship with my shame. I now understand how my shame and perfectionism helped me survive 5 different elementary schools, taught me how to make friends, finish college, acquire a job. But today, I've learned to ask my shame to please step back, to let the compassionate adult comfort the anxious child inside. You see, my PTSD diagnosis is only a small part of the woman I have become. I am not my parents. I am not my past, and I am not my mental illness. I'm just me. And I did quit that miserable job. Yes. After 28 years in the corporate world, I left it all behind, and I started my own business, teaching a seated dance program for senior citizens. As an actress, writer, dancer, mental health advocate, my struggles have only helped me become more committed than ever to erasing stigma. Because for me, mental illness is more than a biological predisposition. It's a silent family epidemic perpetuated by misinformation, shame, and fear. My goal is to eradicate the painful silence my family endured by finding new ways to transform fear and isolation into compassion and community. Thank you.